Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is, well, it's to decode how to turn incredibly dry transactional information into an absolute masterclass in engagement.
Right, which is no small feat.
No, it's really not. And we're using a specific lesson from the Spry English podcast as our blueprint for this. Because, we have all been there, haven't we?
Oh, definitely.
You walk into a grocery store and you have this laser focus. You are there for exactly one carton of milk.
Yep, just the milk.
Right. It is supposed to be a surgical strike. You plan to be in and out in 5 minutes flat.
It's the classic delusion of the modern shopper, really. You tell yourself, you won't even grab a basket because you're only buying that one single item.
Exactly. You are above the basket. You don't need it. But then somehow, like 20 minutes later, you are standing at the checkout line holding 2 bags of chips, a bizarrely expensive dark chocolate bar, and absolutely zero milk.
Yeah, it's just this universal failure of willpower. And honestly, it is the perfect setting for what we're analyzing today.
It really is.
Emmy and Kevin, they're the hosts of this Spry English source material, and they take this exact scenario and use it to teach English learners how to navigate a supermarket.
Right.
But what we're really looking at here is the underlying architecture of their lesson. They take a subject that usually involves, just staring at a sterile list of vocabulary words, and they transform it into this deeply empathetic, highly functional narrative.
And to understand how they pull that off, we really have to look at how they set the baseline. Emmy and Kevin, they don't start by just throwing vocabulary at the listener.
No, not at all.
They start by leaning immediately into that ultimate shopping pitfall we just mentioned. Kevin explicitly states his simple goal, which is find the milk in the dairy section.
Right, he sets the stakes.
But right out of the gate, they joke about the danger of the supermarket, going in for milk and leaving with chocolate and chips. Then they outline a clear roadmap for the lesson. So entering the store, talking about products and prices, asking for help, paying, and then a mini quiz at the very end.
So they establish a highly structured curriculum right there. But they disguise the rigidity of that structure with relatable banter.
It reminds me of the setup for a heist movie.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Yeah. You know that opening scene where the mastermind lays out the intricate plan?
Yeah.
We go in, we grab a basket, we find the dairy section, we secure the milk, and we get out.
Right, the perfect crime.
Exactly. But because it's a narrative, the plan is going to go hilariously off script. My question, though, is about the pedagogy here.
Okay, lay it on me.
Why start a language lesson by highlighting failure and distraction? Why not just get straight to the point and say, hey, here's the word for milk?
Well, the answer really comes down to the neurology of learning, specifically something linguists call the affective filter.
The affective filter, okay.
Yeah. When an adult is learning a new language, their anxiety is naturally very high. Adults are used to feeling competent in their native language, right?
Well, you know how to express yourself.
Exactly. So being reduced to the linguistic level of a toddler feels incredibly vulnerable. And when you feel that kind of stress or self-consciousness, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, it just lights up.
And I imagine a lit-up amygdala is probably not great for absorbing new adjectives.
Precisely. It's terrible for it. When the amygdala is highly active, it essentially blocks the flow of information to the prefrontal cortex.
Which is where the actual learning happens.
Yep, that's where conscious learning and language acquisition take place. That blockage, that's the affective filter. If a learner is stressed, intimidated, or even just bored, that filter goes up, and literally no new information gets in.
Oh, wow. So by establishing a relatable, humorous scenario right out of the gate, Emmy and Kevin are actively disarming the listener's amygdala.
That's exactly it. By making Kevin the everyman who gets distracted by snacks and makes mistakes, the listener gets to relax.
Right, because Kevin takes the fall so the listener feels safe.
That is the exact mechanism at play. The lesson shifts from being this rigid academic exercise, which might trigger performance anxiety, into a shared, empathetic human experience.
You're laughing with him.
Right. The listener can laugh at Kevin's lack of willpower. And when you attach a positive emotion, like humor or empathy, to new vocabulary, the brain marks that information as safe and memorable, rather than threatening or tedious.
That completely reframes how I look at their pacing. But that actually brings up another question I had about efficiency.
Sure. What's that?
So let's move from the setup to the first real vocabulary building segment. The heist has begun, right? They have their basket, and they're in the produce section.
Scene of the crime.
Yes. So Emmy points out the tomatoes, noting they cost $3 per kilo, and they look at cucumbers. Then she asks Kevin if he wants fruit, specifically apples. He says yes. So Emmy asks him to choose red or green.
Right, a completely straightforward binary choice.
A completely straightforward choice that Kevin treats like a dramatic, life-altering decision. I mean, he agonizes over it.
He really does.
He says, this is a difficult decision. And Emmy just laughs at him and reminds him, Kevin, it's just apples. He eventually settles on red. Now, considering the limited time in an audio lesson, spending valuable dialogue on a grown man agonizing over the color of an apple, it feels like a strange choice.
It seems like a waste of time.
Exactly. Why not use that airtime to introduce more complex vocabulary, like, I don't know, different types of produce or specific grammatical rules?
I get that. It does seem counterintuitive to spend time on something so basic. However, if we look at the cognitive science behind learning, highlighting a remarkably simple choice like red versus green is actually a highly deliberate tool.
Really?
Yeah, it is all about managing cognitive load.
Okay, let's define cognitive load in this context. We are talking about, like, the brain's bandwidth.
Exactly. Think of your working memory like a computer's RAM. It only has so much processing power at any given moment.
Right, it can get overloaded.
Right. So when you introduce a complex new grammatical structure and combine it with a complex new cultural concept and top it off with high-level vocabulary all at once, the system crashes.
Too many tabs open.
Yes. The adult brain craves complexity because we are complex thinkers. But when acquiring a completely new language, that complexity is actually the enemy of retention.
So if Emmy had asked him to choose between, say, a locally sourced organic Honeycrisp and an imported Granny Smith, the learner's brain would be working way too hard to visualize and translate the objects themselves.
Spot on. The learner would be bogged down trying to parse those complicated nouns.
Yeah.
By keeping the object and the scenario incredibly simple, just picking between a red apple and a green apple, the cognitive load remains remarkably low.
So the bandwidth is free for the actual lesson.
Exactly. The learner's brain is entirely free to focus on the sounds, the pronunciation, and the structural placement of the adjectives red and green. The concept of the apple requires zero mental energy.
Leaving like 100% of the brain's RAM available for the target language. That is fascinating. You have to strip away the intellectual complexity to make room for the linguistic mechanics.
You really do.
And I guess the humor of Kevin overcomplicating a simple choice serves as the memory hook, right? You remember the ridiculousness of him agonizing over a basic apple?
Yes, and by proxy, the target words stick in your mind far better than if you had just read them repeatedly off a flashcard. They are manipulating cognitive load while maintaining engagement through narrative humor. It is a very delicate balance.
Wow. Speaking of narrative, this is where the source material introduces an entirely unexpected side plot that completely changes the environment.
Of the pets.
The pets. Just as we settle into the straightforward shopping trip, Emmy shifts her hosting tone and brings up a very specific real-world problem, navigating the store with pets. We find out Kevin has actually brought his pets along for the errand.
Which is a complication that introduces a whole new set of environmental rules.
Yeah, and the imagery they use here is so specific and vivid. Kevin has brought Sunny, his dog, and Lily, who is described very deliberately as a small, cute, fully white kitten.
Very specific details.
But they encounter an automatic door with a clear sign, no pets inside. So the plan has to pivot. They locate a small waiting area outside where the pets must stay.
Right.
But even out there, the narrative continues. The personalities of the animals shine through instantly. Sunny the dog is sitting there wagging his tail, staring at a snack poster.
And the kitten.
Meanwhile, Lily the white kitten is sitting calmly, looking longingly at a milk advertisement. It's just adorable.
It is a very charming vignette.
It is. But from a strict teaching perspective, injecting this entirely different set of vocabulary, waiting areas, rules, pets, kittens, into a lesson about buying groceries seems like a massive detour.
It feels disconnected from the grocery list.
Yeah. Doesn't introducing all these outside elements risk derailing the focus on transactional supermarket language?
It might appear that way on the surface, but it is actually deeply rooted in the concept of contextual learning. I mean, real-life errands are rarely frictionless.
That's true. Something always goes wrong.
Right. They're not just about walking up to a cash register and completing a financial transaction. They involve navigating your physical environment, reading signs, and following unexpected instructions.
Like encountering a physical barrier like those automatic doors and having to process a written rule to move forward.
Precisely. When they read the "No Pets Inside" sign, they are modeling how to process environmental language. But look even closer at the specific details you mentioned about the pets.
Okay.
Pay attention to what the animals are doing while they wait outside.
Well, Sunny the dog is looking at a poster for snacks, and Lily the kitten is looking at a milk advertisement.
Notice the connection.
Oh, wow. They are essentially using the pets as visual flashcards.
Exactly.
The animals are mirroring the exact grocery items, snacks, and milk that Kevin is supposed to be dealing with inside the store.
That is the absolute brilliance of it. The visual cues of the pets brilliantly reinforce the core supermarket vocabulary they just established.
That's so clever.
It really is. The learner is hearing the concepts of snacks and milk again, but the context has completely shifted. It provides necessary repetition without feeling repetitive or tedious.
It's an incredibly elegant way to weave vocabulary reinforcement naturally into the world building of the story. So rather than just repeating milk, milk, milk over and over,
Right, which gets boring fast.
they associate the word with the image of this cute white kitten staring at a poster. That is a masterful way to handle repetition. So, okay, the pets are safely parked outside in the waiting area, and we finally return to the core narrative climax.
The moment of truth inside the store.
Exactly. Kevin goes inside and immediately has to ask for help because despite his master plan, he still cannot find the milk.
Typical.
He approaches the store staff and uses a great polite phrase, "Excuse me, where's the milk?" The staff directs him to aisle 5. Victory is within his grasp.
But, as with any good heist, this is exactly when the complication arises.
The ultimate trap is sprung. He wanders into the snack aisle. Suddenly, Kevin is overwhelmed by the sheer variety of chocolate, chips, and cookies.
A downfall.
Right. And Emmy, acting as the voice of reason, tries to reel him in. She explicitly reminds him of his own rule. "You said I only need milk." And Kevin offers what might be the most universally relatable defense ever.
What does he say?
He just says, yes, but life changes.
Oh, that's brilliant. That specific phrase, life changes, is a wonderful piece of conversational pragmatics.
It just feels so natural. And then he starts getting completely overwhelmed by the choices of chocolate. You know, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, white chocolate.
Spiraling.
Totally spiraling. Emmy finally caves and allows him one snack, but Kevin immediately tries to bargain. He pushes back against the limit of one. He negotiates and says, okay, 2 small ones.
He treats it like a high-stakes diplomatic negotiation.
It completely mirrors a child bargaining at bedtime. You tell a kid they can have one more story, and they counteroffer with, okay, but how about 2 short stories?
Right, yes.
It is a universal human negotiation tactic. It makes the dialogue feel alive, rather than like some sterile textbook example.
What Emmy and Kevin are doing here touches on a vital aspect of language acquisition, which is mastering social rhythms.
Social rhythms, okay.
Yeah. Being fluent in a language is not just knowing the dictionary definitions of words or even stringing them together with perfect grammar. Fluency is understanding how to use those words to navigate different social registers and relationships.
Let's unpack that a bit. When you say social registers, you mean adjusting how you speak based on who you are talking to.
Exactly. Look at the progression in this single chapter of their lesson. First, Kevin models how to initiate a formal, polite interaction with a stranger when he asks the staff for help finding aisle 5.
Right, excuse me, where is the milk?
Exactly. The language is clean, direct, and respectful. Then, moments later, he models an informal, playful negotiation with a friend over the snacks. The rhythm completely changes.
It becomes much more colloquial and persuasive.
Right. They are teaching the listener that you do not speak to a store clerk the same way you bargain with your friend over chocolate.
That is such a crucial distinction. It is the music of the language, not just the lyrics. And that leads us directly to the checkout counter, which really tests those social rhythms.
Oh, definitely.
They finally make it to the register, which requires a totally different kind of interaction. The cashier asks if they need a bag. The total comes to $20, and Kevin successfully asks to pay by card.
This interaction at the checkout is a perfect example of how the brain has to abruptly shift gears.
Shifting gears is a great way to describe it. It feels very mechanical compared to the snack aisle.
It is very much like switching gears in a manual car. When Kevin is bargaining with Emmy over the chocolate, the engine is running loose and informal. The rhythm is playful. But the moment he steps up to the cashier, he has to press the clutch, shift gears, and engage a completely different mechanism. The interaction becomes rigid, polite, and highly transactional.
He has to abandon the informal tone entirely.
Exactly. The brain has to abruptly abandon the informal register and retrieve the formal structural phrases required to complete a financial exchange.
Things like, can I pay by card? Or responding to, do you need a bag? It is a completely different script.
And by placing these interactions back to back in the narrative, the podcast allows the learner to hear and feel that friction of code switching in real time.
So the mission is accomplished, the milk is secured, the illicit snacks are paid for, the pets are retrieved, the narrative arc concludes.
It's a successful trip.
Yes, but this is where the source material takes a very abrupt structural turn. We transition from this fun, flowing narrative adventure directly into what is essentially a strict classroom review.
A big shift in tone.
Huge. Emmy's tone completely shifts. She drops the conversational banter and adopts a very clear, deliberate teaching persona.
She establishes what we could call the pedagogical anchor.
Right. She explicitly reviews the useful phrases from the story. Where is the milk? How much is this? Excuse me, can you help me? Can I pay by card? And Kevin jumps in to encourage the listener to actively participate, using that classic phrase, practice makes perfect.
Good advice.
True, but they do not just ask the listener to repeat the words. They launch into a mini quiz, which they even label as being a harder challenge. They test the listener on the exact scenarios from the story. How do you ask the price? Where do you find milk? What do you say if you need help?
They force the listener out of a passive listening state and into a state of active recall.
See, as a listener, I found the shift from the playful story with the white kitten and the chocolate negotiation to this strict teacher-student quiz format to be quite jarring.
It breaks the immersion.
Yeah, it felt like the spell of the story was broken. Could their lesson have succeeded without that final quiz section? Was it truly necessary to break the fourth wall and quiz the audience like that?
Well, it is a valid critique of the listening experience, I'll give you that.
All right.
But from a pedagogical standpoint, that jarring shift is entirely necessary. It gets to the heart of how our memories actually encode new information.
Okay, how so?
Well, the narrative story provides the hook, that explicit review and quiz provide the anchor.
The hook versus the anchor. Explain the difference in how the brain processes those two things.
Sure. The narrative, the humor, the relatable situations, those lower the affective filter we discussed earlier. They make you pay attention and ensure the lesson is enjoyable.
Right.
But enjoyment alone does not wire new linguistic pathways in the adult brain. Passive listening is essentially just entertainment. When you are just listening to a story, your brain is tracking the plot, not necessarily memorizing the syntax.
Oh, I see. So without the quiz, I might walk away thinking, wow, that was a funny story about a guy buying too much chocolate while his cat waited outside.
Exactly.
But if I walked into a store the next day, I might completely blank on how to actually ask a cashier for a credit card transaction.
Precisely. You would remember the narrative arc, but you would not retain the target functional phrases. The quiz forces active recall.
It makes you work for it.
It does. It signals to the brain, hey, this specific string of words is vital for survival in this environment. We need to save this to long-term memory. The struggle of trying to remember the phrase during the quiz is actually the moment the learning is cemented.
Wow.
Yeah, without those final chapters explicitly summarizing the takeaways and forcing retrieval, the lesson risks evaporating the moment the audio stops.
It's kind of like the difference between watching a video of someone riding a bike and actually getting on the bike and trying to pedal. The quiz makes you pedal.
Exactly. The story makes you want to ride, but the quiz ensures you actually know how.
To synthesize all of this, it sounds like the Spry English podcast succeeds by executing a very careful balancing act. They are wrapping a foundational, highly structured language curriculum inside a highly relatable narrative. They use the humor of Kevin's snack distractions and the vivid imagery of the pets waiting outside to bypass the brain's defense mechanisms.
Because they recognize that human beings are fundamentally wired for narrative, not for spreadsheets and flashcards. When we find the story in the data becomes meaningful.
And by balancing that engaging narrative with the strict, structured repetition of the quiz and practical phrases, they create an incredibly effective blueprint for learning. And honestly, there is a broader application here for all of us, no matter what subject we are trying to tackle.
Oh, for sure. The mechanics of learning are universal.
Exactly. Think about your own learning processes, whether you are trying to learn a new language, or maybe you are trying to master a complex new software program at work, or even picking up a new hobby.
It all applies.
Consider how injecting a narrative or finding the humor in your inevitable mistakes makes the information stick far better than just sitting there with a dense manual attempting rote memorization. If you can lower your own affective filter by not taking your failure so seriously, your brain is much more open to absorbing the new skills.
And when it comes to language specifically, the story is always about how we interact with our environment and the people within it.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating concept to mull over. Every mundane chore you do, like figuring out the price of tomatoes, choosing between a red or green apple, or navigating the rigid politeness of handing your card to a cashier, is actually a deeply ingrained cultural script.
Right. You execute these routines on autopilot in your native language without giving them a second thought.
Yeah.
You're performing a highly complex social dance, but you have memorized the choreography so well you do not even realize you are dancing.
But imagine if you were suddenly dropped into a completely foreign environment tomorrow, where the language, the environmental signs, and the social rhythms were entirely different. Which of your unspoken automatic routines would suddenly become your biggest challenges? Because the next time you walk into a grocery store with laser focus for just a single carton of milk, you might realize that navigating that space was never really just about the milk at all.
Great job, dear friends! Today we practiced useful supermarket English together.
Now you're ready to use these expressions in real life.
And if you haven't watched our full supermarket story episode yet,
Click here and continue learning with Spry English.